Good morning. Welcome back to our Viva cycle. To start off, I'd like to apologize for any stray noises you hear in the background, and sorry about the perspective. It might look a little weird, but this is not from my typical recording device. Anyway, this is the week 15 Viva. This week's Viva question is, what do Rome's origin myths tell us about their culture and their values? When people think of Rome, we tend to imagine its extreme violence, especially toward Christians around Nero's time. Despite this, though, the Romans initially had a very strict ethical and moral code and a rich sense of their own morality. This helped shape the culture of both their society and how they reshaped the world in their thousand-year empire. And the three things that we're going to look at today are how Rome's origin myths reveals that they saw themselves as a unique people in history. Oh, sorry, that's the thesis. The three things we are going to look at today are their selfless duty and how they viewed that as the first virtue in their society, their destiny for greatness as preordained by the gods, and their ruthless pragmatism as a necessary precondition for their existence. So first off, we're going to look at how the Aeneid teaches us about the importance with which the Romans viewed duty. The Aeneid tells the story of Aeneas, a Trojan who flees to Italy after the destruction of Troy. It was kind of like a parallel tale to the Odyssey. The Greeks had their Odyssey, and then the Romans thought, well, we want a nice origin myth like that, so we're going to make one. It was composed by a man named Virgil. People believed that the book could help them tell their future. You will remember that we did this in class and we all got pretty funny and interesting futures. Good thing they're probably not going to come true. We can see a sense of this we can see a sense of the Romans' idea of duty in this quote from the Aeneid from Virgil, quote, "There was no more further hope of aid. I yielded to my fate, and bearing still my sire, toward the mountains took my way," unquote. So that was Aeneas speaking, and basically the battle is lost, and he feels a duty to his country to stay in this battle and fight to defend his city, but then his duty to his father is more important than his duty to his country and his city. And so he takes his father on his back and helps him escape. And then he gets on a ship and he sails off to found a new city and a civilization with the remnants of Troy. And after escaping, they end up in Africa because they're wrecked in a storm by Juno, who for some reason really doesn't like them. They encounter the Carthaginians, and Aeneas eventually has to be reminded to continue on his mission by Hermes because he was stuck with the Carthaginians. And after he left, their queen, the Carthaginians' queen, swore eternal hatred toward the Romans because she was in love with Aeneas and he left without telling her, and she wasn't very happy about that. So eventually they arrive in Italy, but they meet the people in the land and they try to start negotiating peace, but war breaks out despite their efforts. Aeneas, he exemplifies a true hero, one who sacrifices his own desire in favor for the good of the community. The Aeneid is an epic of social and national heroism, which was that virtue that the Romans prized above all else. Secondly, we're going to talk about how the story of Romulus and Remus indicates that the Romans believed their world was foreordained by the gods. I'd like to quote from the historian Livy, quote, "The fates had already decreed Sorry, had a bit of a Wi-Fi problem there. Anyway, quote, "The fates had already decreed the origin of this great city and the foundations of the mightiest empire under heaven," unquote. Aeneas' lineage carried down until two brothers, Numitor and Amulius, had a dispute over who got to have the throne. This is quite a common theme in ancient history. So Amulius was much more power-hungry, and so he forces Numitor out and then makes Numitor's daughter become a Vestal virgin, so she doesn't have any kids. The Vestals tended to Vesta's temple. Vesta was the Roman goddess of the hearth and of fire, the equivalent to the Greek goddess Hestia. Anyway, the Vestals tended to Vesta's temple, and they also had to take vows of chastity, hence the no kids. If they violated these vows, they risked being buried alive. The chastity of the Vestals was thought to have a direct impact on the Roman state. This is why the punishment was so severe. Numitor's daughter, however, was impregnated by the Roman god of war, Mars. When the boys were born, they were set adrift in the river in a wicker basket so that they would eventually die. But a she-wolf came upon them when they were on the riverbank and cared for them until they were discovered by a shepherd who took them home to his wife and raised them as his own. When the brothers had grown, they set out to found their own city and nation, but they had a dispute over which hill they wanted to build their city on. The brothers used auguries, which were divination practices that used birds, to determine where they should build. And 6 vultures flew over Remus's hill, but 12 vultures flew over Romulus's hill. And since 12 vultures flew over Romulus's hill, he decided that the gods favored him and that it was foreordained that they should build his city on his hill. And finally, we're going to discuss how this Romulus and Remus story demonstrates the Roman understanding of ethical behavior was predicated upon the preservation of the state, thus making an absolutely ruthless pragmatism the height of virtue. By looking at the story of Pontius Pilate, we can see how his management of the trial of Jesus shows the Roman ideal of justice. We know that Pilate found Jesus to be innocent and thought he should be set free. However, when he saw that the people cried for Jesus' death, Pilate put aside his personal preferences and ordered the execution of Jesus. This illustrates the Roman ideal of putting the interests of the state before your own personal preferences. And we also can see how even after the gods clearly showed favor toward Romulus, Remus shows contempt for his brother by jumping over Romulus's wall. And so immediately after that, Livy says, quote, Remus contemptuously jumped over the newly raised walls and was forthwith killed by the enraged Romulus, who exclaimed, "So shall it be henceforth with everyone who leaps over my walls," unquote. And Rome did not look kindly on the killing of family members. And they viewed elders, and especially elder family members, so highly that the father was allowed to kill his son in punishment if he so wished. But Romulus apparently was justified in his killing of Remus because, wonder of wonders, they thought it furthered the interests of the Roman state and helped to create it. So it helped the state, so it was justified. And they also used this logic in Romulus's orchestration of the kidnapping of the Sabine women. They thought that the ends justified the means, since the Roman state needed to be preserved, and they needed women to do that, then it was perfectly all right to kidnap these women. And so we can see how this all just goes to show that the morality of Rome was first and foremost centered around the benefit of the state. And to wrap this up in a conclusion, Rome's origin myth shows how they thought of themselves as unique people in history, through their selfless duty to society, their destiny for greatness as ordained by the gods, and the ruthless pragmatism as the precondition for their continued existence. Thank you.